Hello and welcome to the latest webinar from Valto titled Designing a Modern SharePoint Intranet. My name's Dougie Wood and I'm a Microsoft MVP. I've been building SharePoint Solutions for the past 10 years and I'm also the creative director here at Valto, who are leading industry experts at building SharePoint intranets. So what we're going to be talking about today? Well, we're going to start off by looking at who actually uses SharePoint and what are they actually using it for. Then I'm going to be showing you some real-world examples of SharePoint intranets and actually talking about what goes into making a great intranet. Then we're going to look at balancing the beauty aspects of an intranet, the look and feel, the aesthetics, the design, versus the functionality of an intranet, such things like navigation bars and other things that people are looking for on an intranet. We're then going to talk about how to design the intranet for the best engagement, so to get the most engagement possible from your users. And then I'm going to finish off with some bonus examples of how SharePoint can be used to build out solutions inside of your SharePoint intranet, things like onboarding systems and building up policy management systems, things like that, which are going to really help get that engagement going for your SharePoint intranet. If you have any questions throughout today's webinar, feel free to drop them as a comment below. If you're watching in live time, then you can use the live chat option inside of YouTube. You will need to be logged in with a YouTube account to do this. And of course, if you ever need any professional help with SharePoint, then there's a contact link in the description below to book in your free SharePoint consultation. So who uses SharePoint and why is it so popular? So what I want to talk a little bit about is actually there's so many different use cases of SharePoint, but it really is dominating the market. We can see there's 200 million worldwide users, daily users of SharePoint. And this is online for accessing SharePoint information, documents, policies, and everything that you would need as part of a company intranet. 80% of Fortune 500 companies across the world are using SharePoint right now to be the technology that hosts their intranet platform. That's Fortune 500, but we also have in the UK the FTSE 100 in the UK. So there's companies like Walmart or Tesco, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Barclays Bank, HSBC. In fact, loads of banking industries trust SharePoint for their intranets. We've got Shell and so many other massive enterprise companies that you will have heard of that are using SharePoint on a day-to-day basis. 200,000 organizations across the globe, all different sections, sectors even, sizes of different companies are using it for sharing news, events, and their single source of truth for document management. So actually having a centralized place where everyone knows that they can go in order to access the latest information. And we've seen this in every industry, from manufacturing with document control, tracking safety training, sharing SOP, standard operating procedures, conducting and documenting audits and quality control. Manufacturing is really booming and using SharePoint to really streamline their processes. We've seen in the legal industry from things like case management and tracking workloads, sharing documentation externally as well to potential customers and prospects. We've seen in the financial services area, policy and regulation libraries, controlled access to financial data. As well as that, we've worked very closely with other industries such as construction for things like project site documentation, toolbox talks, subcontracting information, bid and tender management, as well as providing a mobile-friendly field reports so that people that are actually working on construction sites can easily access documents both on and offline as well. Again, if any of this sounds like this is going to be useful for you, you can book in a free consultation using the link below, and we can discuss more examples within your industry. And then finally, we have 75% of the market share of content and collaboration technologies on the market right now is taken up by SharePoint. It's been leading the way in terms of being a content management platform for the last 20 years. This is something which is not going to change. It's been here forever, and it's going to continue to be the leading content management platform for enterprises. So we've talked about who is using SharePoint and why they're using it, but actually what goes into making a good SharePoint intranet? Let's take a look. What makes a great SharePoint intranet? Now, I've been building SharePoint intranets for the past 10 years, and I can tell you there's a number of things that you should be thinking about to kind of get the best experience possible for your SharePoint intranet. Now, what I tend to do is I try and start off by talking to my customers about thinking about finding balance within your SharePoint intranet. Now, everybody's intranet is going to be different, and there's going to be different needs that you're going to take into consideration. However, you do need to be thinking about everything on a kind of scale of one end of an extreme to the other. So the first thing to find the right balance of is the functionality and the aesthetics. Now, what I mean by this is that you are going to see some intranets which are heavily functionality driven. They're very navigation heavy. There's a lot of buttons. There's a lot of things on the page, a lot of information that you're trying to cram into people's faces. They're very functionality heavy. Sometimes this can lead to it not being very aesthetic. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is you could have an intranet which is very aesthetic, as it has a lot of images, has a lot of sliders, a lot of videos, things like that, but it's not truly meeting the functionality needs of the end user. So you have to weigh this up and find the right point on the scale that's going to meet your users' expectations. We've also got to think about the manual versus automation scale. Now, what I mean by this is how much time is it going to take you to create and maintain new content? Where is that content going to be coming from? Are you personally going to create it? Is your team going to create it? Is content going to be created from individual departments around the organization? Are you going to pull in content automatically from other third-party areas? So you need to think about what content is going to exist and what content is going to be manually created versus what is going to be automated, as in not just necessarily having systems automatically pull data and news articles from third-party websites, but it could be that you're thinking from an automation point of view that you are getting new content coming from different areas of the organization. The next thing to consider is the navigation versus search. Now, how everybody finds a document is going to be completely different. So let's say, for example, we take a user who's looking for the, say, annual leave holiday entitlement. He's planning on going on a nice sunny holiday somewhere, and he wants to know how much holiday he can actually take in a particular year. Now, this comes down to actually how each user will find content. Some people will want a navigation bar, and this is where things like mega menu drop downs, where you have the top level navigation, where you can see maybe things like policies or quick links or applications that people want to use. And then underneath them, or even it could be a bar that says departments, and then underneath them, you have, for example, under departments, maybe human resources, and there's a third layer down from that. You have, say, for example, policies, and people can go there and find, say, the annual leave holiday policy through a navigational sort of way. There could be other buttons that you find throughout the intranet. Buttons like policies on the actual intranet homepage is very popular and quite common to see. But then again, you can have people that are going to use the search bar. So you can have people using search across the top and typing in things like holiday, annual leave, policies, things like that to find the same type of content. So you need to make sure that your documents are well tagged, well structured, so people can find both through the navigation bar, but also the search bar. Now, a third way that I want to talk about that a lot of people will soon be finding documents through is via sort of AI chatbots. Now, this comes through the what we call Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. And you can use Copilot now to search SharePoint sites. So previously where you might have searched for, say, annual leave policy, but actually it's called holiday policy, you might have struggled to find it. Whereas actually using Copilot inside of SharePoint, it's going to be very confident that it's going to find basically that policy because it understands the context of what the user is searching for and not just looking specifically for a document which is called annual leave policy, as an example. So you need to think also about how much content you're going to be generating. Now, this really impacts the design of a SharePoint site. Because let's take, for example, with news, you need to kind of reverse engineer how many news articles you're expecting to see on your intranet homepage. Because let's say, for example, if you're going to only create a news article once a month, then if you were to display 12 news articles on your intranet homepage, it means that you're going to have news articles there for 12 months, and it's going to make your intranet feel very stagnant, very old, very dated. Whereas actually, if, say, for example, you knew you were only going to be creating a news article once a month, maybe just show 3 news articles on the homepage, and then that way at least you know that news articles are only showing for 3 months, and on the 4th month it's going to fall off, and people can always get access to those news articles. They can always go and see them afterwards in an archive area, but you don't necessarily need to be presenting it to them. The reason I say this is because imagine, let's take that example where you're only creating 1 news article a month and you're displaying 12. You're going to be kind of in August and still seeing news articles from the Christmas party that happened 8 months before. So it's going to feel very dated. I've seen so many intranets make this mistake before, and it very quickly makes the internet look boring, outdated, and people feel like they can't trust things which are outdated, or if they've seen the information multiple times, they'll quickly get bored, and your engagement rates will plummet because people will no longer want to go and access that SharePoint intranet. So as I say, reverse engineer this. Think about, where is the content coming from? Are you going to create the content? Are your team going to create the content? Or other areas of the business going to be creating content and feeding that through? The other thing I would think about when you're reverse engineering is that you'll find when you're first launching a new intranet, people are very keen, people want to help, people want to support, and they'll probably overcommit to what actual content they can provide. So again, with your SharePoint design, think about this. Maybe almost, if people are saying that you're going to get, say, 5 news articles a month, maybe just factor in that in reality, once this is all calmed down, you're probably only going to get 2, 3. So factor that into your design as well when you're thinking about how much news articles there are. It's always better to have a really fresh looking intranet homepage with loads of news articles which are constantly coming in and changing, and people feeling almost like they're missing out by not going there and seeing these news articles. So actually, this is going to drive engagement. People are going to want to go there. People are going to want to see the latest news articles. So let's jump in and take a little look around what a typical intranet homepage looks like. So this is a typical kind of intranet homepage. And as I say, we would typically see things like a hub navigation bar across the top, which is going to help us with our kind of navigational purposes, where people prefer to click on things. And we can see here on this drop down, we've got, for example, applications, and then we've grouped our apps by certain topics. So for example, we've got an employee portal area. So we've got things like employee starter forms. We've got our control documents area. So for our quality control, our ISO 9001, our policy trackers, things like that, all grouped under certain categories. Further down on the homepage, you can see we're trying to balance here, and I would say this particular layout is probably slightly leaning more towards the functionality scale. When we're looking on the functionality versus aesthetic scale, this is leaning much more towards the kind of the functionality side of things, because we've got a lot of navigational items here. You can see we've got what we call the hero web part up at the top, which we can easily change the background images, we can change the text and the link of where they're linking to. These could link to both internal resources, so things like SharePoint pages, files, folders, documents, other SharePoint sites, or it could link to things externally as well. So if we wanted it to link out to third-party sort of payroll systems, or sales CRM systems, or news websites, whatever it is, you might want to link to other third-party applications. And you can do this with any of these navigation options, not just this hero tile. You could do it across the top, or you could use what we call our quick links web part on the right-hand side. Now, the quick links web part, as I say, you can specify the text, you can specify the icons which sit next to it, and you can either use Microsoft stock icons, or you can even upload your own icons as well if you wanted to. And these typically link to kind of systems, apps that your organization is using. Something else pretty cool that I've seen people do recently is that they changed this, rather than saying our systems or our apps or quick links, it maybe almost starts it with a question. So it says, how do I, and then ... And then these quick links are actually answers to or they are the questions essentially. So it might be, how do I, and then rather than control documents, it says find policies. And then you click on that and you go through to our control documents, which is our policies area. Or how do I book, and then rather than desk booking, it says book a desk in the office. And then you click on that and it takes you through to our desk booking app. So there's a couple of different ways you could approach this. And I would suggest that you potentially think of A/B testing this. So when you're building out your intranet, have a bit of a pilot group that looks at this, have two different versions of your SharePoint homepage, one with this kind of direct route, just saying what it is. It's an onboarding system, it's a desk booking system, and maybe have another version of it, an A/B test, which is talking about these are questions and answers that people are clicking through to. Further down, now this is actually a bespoke web part that we've built, and it's worth knowing that actually you can build your own web parts in SharePoint, or if you wanted to, companies like Valto, we often help build bespoke web parts as well for SharePoint intranets when there's web parts which maybe aren't quite meeting your expectations, and we need to basically bridge a requirements gap by building something specific. So in this example, we can see we've built something which is showing kind of pop-up notifications. It's showing where we've got, say, things like we're giving alerts, local road closures. So recently at Valto, we had the road which was right next to our office completely shut by police, and we wanted to let everybody know on our intranet that the road was actually closed, and diversions were in place and things like that. So you can see we can have a little pop-up message here for people. Further down, we've got our news. Now, as I said before, we've got to balance this. We've got to get this right. If you don't have loads of content, don't use a layout like this. So we're showing here, we've got 6, so 12. We've got 12 different articles. As I say, if we're creating one a month, this will get very boring very quickly. But say, for example, if we're creating one every day or every other day or something like that, we'll quickly fill this up. And what we're saying is one a day doesn't mean that you're creating it one a day, but maybe if you're looking at content across the organization. So say, for example, here you can see this is our hub. So our intranet homepage is often referred to as a hub inside of SharePoint. And this is our intranet homepage. So any news articles which are tagged with hub, we know has come from our intranet homepage. Whereas we can see other departments are also creating news articles. So you can see here, for example, human resources have created an article, finance have created an article, information technology or IT department have created their own article, and it's pulling up from their site. And in fact, actually, if I was to go on to the IT site, I would see a summary of only news articles that have been created from their site. But they're all pulling up, they're all rolling up to our intranet homepage. We can also see things like local time, local weather. Now, this is fantastic, especially for enterprise level companies who are operating all over the world. Maybe you don't necessarily have offices yourself, but you probably have customers that are in each of these different areas. So again, people going onto the internet can get the local time, but also things like the local weather for certain regions of the world that you're working with. And again, I mean, it's a very British thing, this, but you might start off your phone calls with people in other offices or customers that are around the world with, how's the weather? But actually, you already kind of know this. So you can say, oh, I can see actually it's really hot at the moment. So I'm speaking to a colleague or a customer in Tokyo and saying, actually, it's really hot. I can see you're probably having a heat wave there at the moment, are you? So it gives you kind of a little bit of fuel for kind of conversations and things like that. Further down, we've got things like upcoming events. So we can scroll through these and we can see latest upcoming events. And again, this can pull from multiple areas of your intranet. Often intranets are made up of different business units, departments, or topic areas, and you could have events around them. So say, for example, you've got a training area or training department, like a learning development department. Maybe they have their own SharePoint site, and maybe they have events for SharePoint training, Power Apps training, things like that, which are coming up, and we can roll them up onto our intranet homepage. Further down, we've got things like this call to action web part, which is fantastic for sort of linking off to maybe a feedback form. Maybe it's built in Microsoft Forms, but it could be built in any other third-party application as well. As long as it's got a URL, you can jump directly to it. But this could be a feedback form for things like the intranet, but I've also seen things like feedback for recent benefits or schemes that have been kind of launched internally, and you wanted to get a bit of feedback from the business. I've also seen things like whistleblowing forms, like anonymous kind of feedback forms and things like that to raise issues and that sort of thing. I've seen those linked from the intranet homepages in the past before. Also, it's very important to be thinking about videos, so we can embed videos from YouTube directly. So there is a native integration between YouTube and SharePoint, so you can integrate your videos from YouTube directly into there. But you could also embed them from things like other third-party platforms or Microsoft Stream, for example. You can embed those videos. And again, it's going to be really important to get the kind of content right inside of your SharePoint Intranet to keep that engagement level high. So we talked a little bit briefly before about navigation, but navigation is really important. In fact, I found this quote that said, "Navigation is the key to exploring the uncharted, the gateway to discovery, and the path to understanding." Now, this is obviously a little bit cheesy, but I think it raises a really good point. And I'm just talking a little bit about that. Everyone will find things differently. But what you want to make sure of is that you're thinking about how is this kind of user journey, basically for each of these kind of core areas like policies, procedures, maybe marketing materials, forms, templates, things like that people want to access. How are they going to access them? Again, you could also A/B test this with a couple of different pilot groups. Ask them, would you use the search bar? Would you use navigation options? If you were to use navigation options, what would you choose? You can also think about, there's no right or wrong answer to this as well, to be honest, but in terms of duplicating links. Now, what I mean by this is you might find that there's the same link across the top navigation bar as there is within a quick links web part or the hero tiles. Now, some people don't like to duplicate links because they want to just have one user journey that they point everyone towards. Now, again, that's fine to a certain extent. The benefits of that is, say, for example, that link was to ever change, you've got to remember where was it linked to and make sure you're updating all those different links and things like that. But that's very rare, to be honest, that happens. But if you were to duplicate links, as in having a link in the top navigation bar, but also on the home page, in the quick links bar, things like that, you're increasing the chances that people are going to find your content. Now, you can see there's actually an area inside of SharePoint pages where you can see analytics. You can see how many people have accessed a specific page. So if I just jump into that as like a little example for you. So you can actually see here across the top, we've got this analytics button, but this is on every single SharePoint page, by the way. It's not just your home page. And you can click on this and it will show you a very short summary of analytics. Basically, page views by the last 7 days, 30 days, 90 days, average time that's spent on a page, and also the page traffic by time. So basically per day, per time, what's the most highest traffic. But use this in combination of when you're planning your navigation, think about using this analytics to actually track, are people landing on the SharePoint pages? If they're not, maybe look at adding the links to these pages into other areas of your intranet, not just in the top navigation bar, but maybe add a button onto your intranet homepage if it's really important information that you need to make sure that people are accessing frequently. It's worth thinking as well that eyes naturally go to the top right corner of a screen and then to the left and then down. So it's almost like an upside down L shape. So again, thinking about kind of that navigation, where on the page are things sitting and where are people going to primarily have their focus. We've got two different navigation bars at the top of our screen. So let me just jump back and show you this. So back on our screen up here, so you can see this is what we refer to as our hub navigation bar. So this is just kind of one, we're only using one navigation bar as an example here. But you can also have what they call a site navigation bar, which basically is a secondary navigation bar underneath this. So as I say, in this example, not a great example because we don't actually have both links on here. We just have our hub navigation bar. But maybe if I was to jump into our compliance site, you can see now we've got our hub navigation bar across the top, but then we have this area here which we call our site navigation bar. Now the difference is across the top, our hub navigation bar is designed to be consistent throughout the intranet. So if I was to jump to a different department site, say for example I jump into my finance site now, you'll see this navigation bar across the top up here stays exactly the same, but actually in theory, I know, great, not a great example, but this site navigation is specific to the current site we're looking at, so it can be different. So these links here should really relate to the content on this specific site. So this is our finance department site, so these links should really be specific to that finance site. We have things like our highlighted content web part. So this could be actually pulled through content from different areas of our intranet. We also have, say, that call to action web part. So if I just jump back to our homepage here. So I say there's loads of areas that we could be using navigation. Heroes, quick links, things like that. Call to action web parts. These are all navigational based web parts which we can easily jump around to. We can also use things like images as the ability to actually as a navigation bar, so we could put images on the page rather than actually just purely just text. And as I say, review all of the kind of the navigation that you're using with that kind of analytical page tool to see where your traffic is going and when. Now, the next thing to think about when you're designing a fantastic SharePoint intranet is communication and the communication best practices for a SharePoint intranet. So good communication on an intranet fosters transparency, boosts employee engagement, and streamlines information sharing across the organization. So as I said, a newsfeed is crucial for employee engagement. This is where you're going to see the latest information pulling through. Now, on the intranet example I was showing you before, we just had one newsfeed, but you could technically have multiple newsfeeds that are broken down by different topics. Now, actually, this screenshot I'm showing you here is from what we refer to as a news hub. So very large organizations and enterprises that have a lot of different news feeds often just consolidate this into a specific SharePoint site which has loads of different news based on different topics. So it might be, say, for example, we have CEO updates, so messages, updates which are coming from the C-suite, which are being displayed as news items. Maybe we could even do things like filtering news articles for the user based on what country they work in, or what job title they have, or what department that they work in. So say, for example, I work in the UK, so my country settings is going to be set to the UK, so it's only going to pull through news articles which are related to the UK, offices based in London or Manchester or places like that. Maybe my department set to IT, so again, based on the configuration settings of my profile, it knows I work at the IT department, so it's going to filter and only show me news articles which are related to the IT department. So there's so many different ways that you could slice and dice up the information inside of SharePoint news feeds. This provides real-time updates and announcements, and it keeps your employees informed about key goings-on and announcements around your organization. It encourages knowledge sharing as well, so it means that people are more likely to see what's going on, updates, key information than they possibly wouldn't have been doing before the intranet was launched. You can also reduce duplication, and it increases productivity. And the news web part can be displayed in many different ways. So actually, on this example here, everything you see here is actually a news web part. This is just displayed as a carousel. This is displayed as kind of an itemized list, and this one's showing kind of the top priority one. So it's showing the latest news article in a much larger icon than the rest of the news articles that have previously gone before it. You can see we've got this see all button, which is next to all of the news web parts as well. So as news articles are added, the old ones get dropped off. Depending on how many you're saying that are going to be displayed on the page, we can customize that. So maybe we might just have the latest CEO updates, and everything else drops off the page. Or in this case, we're showing the latest 3. But essentially, once you say, for example, if we were to say we're going to show 3 news articles, when the 4th news article is added, the oldest news item is then going to be dropped off of that display. You can also choose to manually, if you wanted to, this is a bit more detailed, but you can manually go and drag around news items as well. So if there's one you always wanted to make sure is at the top of the list, you can manually configure that as well if you wanted to. You can get news items to pull basically everything. So for a newsfeed could pull all news items from every single newsfeed that it finds that user has access to. Or you could just be very specific to say only pull from CEO updates. You could choose multiples. You could say pull from CEO updates and finance updates and this and that, and you can create a multitude of this. Or you could just say based on user. Now, this is a bit of a kind of dark art, bit black magic, because you don't really have control over this. You will let SharePoint kind of define, based on the user's activity of SharePoint, what news items it thinks is relevant to the user. Again, I would pilot this. This works very differently for many different organizations. So I would pilot this and just see what works best for your organization. You can use metadata filters. So as I say, you can audience target by country, by job role, by department, and so much more. There's probably other ideas you can think of that you would want to tag against users. And you can drive traffic via email as well with newsletters. So just to show you how simple this is, if I just go into my news area inside of SharePoint. So basically, when you come to post something, you can either send an email. So let's just go and create a brand new one. news post. Let's create a brand new news item. So let's call it SharePoint training success. Now, I'm not going to put too much into it because it's just a demo. I just wanted to show you. But you can see here now it says post and send. So now with every news item, or you can go in select multiple if you wanted to, you have the option now of sending an email to a group of people or individual people to basically tell them that there is a new news article. Now, I would say this isn't something that you probably want to use forever, but it's a fantastic way that you can transition people who are probably currently getting their news via email. So you're probably sending newsletters or PDFs to people already. But you can actually use these types of features to basically send snippets to people, say, hey, there's a news item in SharePoint, and they go, oh, this sounds interesting. And then they've got the option of viewing the full article inside of SharePoint, so they can jump directly into that, and you're increasing your traffic to your SharePoint site. And again, with communication, it's not just news items. We've got event web parts, so we can communicate key dates, events, training, all sorts of things like that that people can add directly into their own calendar from an events web part. We've looked at what makes a fantastic intranet, but what else goes into designing an intranet to boost engagement from your users? Well, let's look at that next. How to design SharePoint to drive engagement. Now, in the past 10 years of me designing and implementing SharePoint intranets, I've come up against a few different things which I found really useful that have time and time again shown that this has boosted engagement and kept people sticky coming back to the intranet. So the first thing I want to talk about is the use of integrating video into your SharePoint intranet. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can do this, including embedded YouTube videos, which, as I say, is actually a native functionality now. There's a web part that you can add YouTube videos directly into SharePoint. You can embed Microsoft Stream if you really wanted to. So if you've got Stream videos, you can embed them. Or if you're using any other third-party products like Vimeo or things like that, there's plenty of ways that you can embed your videos into SharePoint. Now, research conducted by Cisco showed that video traffic within enterprise networks was projected to account for up to 60% of traffic within the corporate network. Now, video content is just expected nowadays. I mean, you're watching this video right now. You could, if you really wanted to, go and get a SharePoint design book if you wanted to consume it in that way. There's loads of different ways that you could possibly be consuming information. You could be reading about it on a web page, but instead you're choosing to watch this video. And everybody now in their work life is starting to want more and more video, so more like video training courses rather than paper textbooks and things like that. We're seeing in our personal life people using Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Reels and things like that. So short form video content is becoming more and more popular and again becoming expected in day-to-day work life. We're seeing a lot of kind of videos, training videos, things like that be adopted by organizations, but we're also encouraging people to create short form videos that they can launch on their intranet as well for short updates. So rather than spending days putting together a monthly newsletter or something like that, why not get the people that are giving you that information just to record short videos on their mobile phone that can be embedded directly into your SharePoint? Doesn't need to be Hollywood studio quality. We're not trying to design the next blockbuster film with studio sets and lighting and big cameras and film budget crews and all that sort of stuff. We don't need any of that. You literally can just take a selfie style video using your mobile phone, give a little update, say, hey guys, this is what's going on. We're looking at launching a new benefit to the organization. Just wanted to get your thoughts on this and feedback. What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And that's a much quicker, simpler way of getting out there. And actually studies show that this kind of raw, kind of unedited type of footage usually lands much better. It comes off much more trustworthy and authentic. And these are things that people want to actually see. As I say, you could embed a YouTube web part or a Stream web part. So just to show you an example of this, I'm just going to jump back to my intranet homepage and just scroll down a little bit. So there we go. You can see we've got a YouTube video. So one of our kind of popular videos about designing model-driven Power Apps. We've embedded that onto our homepage. Now, this is not a fantastic example of an actual video, but you take this with a pinch of salt. Think of this as you could embed any sort of video you wanted to. Maybe it's a roundup summary. Maybe it's the latest kind of updates. Maybe it's, say, for example, at Valto, we often do kind of quarterly strategy days, which are sometimes hybrids. There's some people that join them remotely, and we record those sessions or record it for people that are on holiday during that time. And then we can embed that video directly into our intranet. So people who were on holiday or missed the meeting can go back and watch that afterwards as well. So integrating video is a massive part. So think about how you could do this. And I say, you don't need to jump directly into this straight away and be kind of doing selfie TikTok style videos and things like that. But think about how you could possibly start getting video content in there. Nowadays with AI, there's plenty of ways that you can even take things like text, documents, PowerPoints, presentations, things like that, and actually convert them into videos with an AI kind of speaker over the top of it. In fact, Microsoft Copilot can even create short videos as well, I think up to about 5 minutes long about specific topics. So you could even use Microsoft Copilot as your AI tool of choice if you wanted to create those short form videos. The other thing which is worth thinking about as well when you're trying to drive engagement is using content sections. Now, within an intranet, it's very, I advise people to break SharePoint pages into multiple content sections. This improves readability and allows for better presentations of diverse information. So you can see a little example here on the right-hand side. We're using sections here, almost like an FAQ type sections where you've got drop-down areas and things like that. So as you open and expand it, maybe more information appears. But sections are really easy to use, and actually the allowing you to completely modernize how the look and feel of your SharePoint intranet works. So most modern websites now take this approach. As you're scrolling through a modern web page, gone are the days where there's like thousands of pages with short form bits of information which are all linking to each other. Nowadays, people are expecting to see more information on one page, but they want to be able to scroll through it. And as you're scrolling through, you're seeing that the different sections are either changing color or they've got different headers or things like that. Now you can see we've got a couple of different sections here. We've got this section on the left-hand side, we've got the section on the right-hand side, but we could even take this a step further if we wanted to. We can change the background colors. So if I just scroll down a little bit, say our news section. So you can see here, this is a section. This events area is a section. So let's say, for example, if we wanted to change this section color, we can easily, or for example, make it collapsible if we wanted to. We can go into design and we can change this color. So you can see here now, we can change these background colors really simply. So now if I republish this, you'll see, once I now scroll down the page, you can see this section now is a lot more obvious that it's something different, that something's changed visually to the eye. I now know that this is a different type of content. So this is navigational type of content and informational. And then when I scroll down, this is more communication type of content, and I know I'm into a different area. So use those sections to kind of boost the kind of visibility and help people understand that content is changing on the same page. So this facilitates clear navigations for points of users, increases readability and reduces cognitive load. So it's much easier for people to process information, and you can group this into related information in a logical context for the user. Future-proofed for updates, so no disruptive layouts and things like that. It's all going to be sort of standardized, and enhances the visual appeal, so it looks more engaging. It wants to kind of help people, and people are going to be a lot more appreciative and engage with the intranet a lot more. So yeah, and also another little top tip is use the Microsoft stock image library. So if we just jump back into a little bit of an example here. So say, for example, if I was to edit this page, and let's say, for example, we're going to create, let's just say at the bottom here, we're going to create like an additional kind of section. So let's say, for example, we'll create, we won't use one column. Let's use a 1/3 left, 1/3 left. So you can see there's different. So we've got flexible layouts. We've got which is basically the new area, which is a lot more kind of dynamic. We can drag and drop things. We've got 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns, 1/3 left, which is basically the one on the right hand side is much bigger, or 1/3 right, where the column on the left hand side is much bigger, or we can't actually use the full width section because we're actually already using this vertical section on the right hand side here. You can only use one or the other for those. But I can say 1/3 left. Then, just as a quick example, you can now see I can add web parts really easily into here. I'm going to add in an image. As I say, use the stock image library. This is a fantastic tool from Microsoft, which is constantly being updated with high quality images, which you can search based on color. So say, for example, if I could spell, type in blue. So at Valto, we use a lot of blue colors. So I can type in blue and I can see different kind of colors like this, or topics. So say, for example, we're looking for something which is more like office themed. So here we go. Somebody using a sort of tablet in an office. Fantastic. We'll add that. And then we can add in a bit of text into our page. So let's just type in here. Ooh, this is some text. Just duplicate that a few times. There we go. Now with our section, I'd say we can make this collapsible if we wanted to. So we can make this collapsible, and as I say, if we wanted to make this more like an FAQ type of layout, it might be, how do I raise a expense request? Something like that. Now, once we've made it collapsible, we can choose whether we show the title or not. We can choose the title heading. We can show the divider between the lines or not. So I'd say turn them on. We can say, do we want it to be on the left or the right? So there's the arrow on the left or the right. And do we want it to be expanded or not? Now I'm going to say no, I'm going to want it to be collapsed, because what I want to show you is I'm going to duplicate this a couple of times. And then what I'm going to do is change this. So maybe something like, how do I submit holiday? I don't know, what are the questions? What day of the month do we get paid? Whatever it is, these are just terrible Q&As, but once you're finished with that, you click on republish, and now I just want to show you what these sections look like. We now have at the bottom a little FAQ section that people can open and close that content, and because it's part of this kind of almost like accordion style collapsible content, again, it's going to help with kind of users' cognitive load. They're not getting smashed with loads of information. They just see the kind of the question, and if they want to see the answer, they can open this up rather than displaying all of that information automatically. So we've looked at some engagement tactics for SharePoint, but now I want to talk a little bit more about how you can use SharePoint to build out more solutions, things like onboarding, policy management, and really get that kind of best return on investment from using SharePoint as your intranet. As a SharePoint expert who's been consulting for the past 10 years, I've seen so many different examples of SharePoint solutions. I want to show you some of my favorite solutions. Things like policy management systems, which will help you keep track of not only when documents need to be updated and who's approved them, but also who has actually read them. Things like onboarding systems inside of SharePoint. So having an area that you can actually track who has actually been onboarded, the tasks which need to be complete, and maybe what is overdue to be chased up. These are all different examples of how SharePoint can be used to get the most return on investment and not just being used as a SharePoint intranet. Now, I've broken down these solutions into specific departmental areas. The first being that human resources can use it for onboarding. SharePoint can be used in a number of different ways to help streamline HR tasks, such as recruitment, onboarding, and offboarding as well. Now, just to jump into a real example of this, I'm just going to go back to my intranet, and I can see across the top, I have these application areas. Now, we actually have a full solution here, which starts off with a new starter form. So we have a little database, essentially, of all of our employees. And we create a new item inside of this database, and this is the triggering point. So this is what will start automatically issuing tasks, not only to the new employee, but also to other employees around the business, tasks such as deploying laptops, adding them into certain security groups, giving them a license, adding them to payroll, all the things that around the business you need to do to onboard a new staff member. We can also track things like what health and safety policies that they've read, staff handbooks, quick equipment policies, things like that that you want to make sure that they've actually read. So this integrates into our policy management system as well. Now, Other things that this system will do is we also have what we call a pre-onboarding area. So this is an area before the employee has actually physically joined the organization that you can share with them. Technically, it's called an extranet. It's SharePoint that's shared externally. But this could be information on the business, so how we work, our values, benefits of the company, things like that. Now, the reason why you might want to have an intranet like this, or I should say an extranet like this, is because everyone in HR knows that just because someone has accepted a job offer doesn't mean that they're actually going to be joining. They could get intercepted. They could get a counter offer from their employer that they're currently working for. They might have also been having other interviews with other competitors and they might take a counter offer. So you want to stand out against the crowd of other companies. And by giving them an area like this to keep them basically engaged with you throughout that process, rather than just them accepting the offer and then going cold for maybe a month, maybe even longer than that. Sometimes employees have like 3 months notice that they have to work out. So rather than going completely cold during that period of time, you want to keep them engaged, keep them excited to be joining with you, reminding them why they're joining you, and make sure that they're actually going to come across the line. So having this area that you can share with them, and again, it might just be you're sharing information to them, but also you could use it to collect information from them. So if you wanted to give them some tasks to be doing before they join, things like providing some ID, maybe uploading their CV somewhere, or giving references or things like that, you can use SharePoint before they even join to actually provide them a platform to do this. So other areas as well. So we also have our employee onboarding area. So once they're actually onboarded, they can then get full access to our onboarding system. Maybe there's more information in here, things like employee details, information on who we are, so as a company, our story, our values, our culture, maybe some other resources, FAQs, how to go about using the kind of expenses app, how to get an ID badge to get into the building, all these different things that a user would probably want to know within the first couple of days of working for their employee. Also, we have our kind of task lists as well. Now these are actually configured via our task config. So you can see in here, we can specify what tasks we want to issue to the new employee, a description, the number of days after they join that task is due, who the mentor is, so who they could reach out to if they have any more questions about that specific task, the department that it relates to. So there might be only certain tasks which relate to certain departments. So say, for example, if you work in IT, there might be a different task than if you worked in the marketing department. And then you can specify whether this is an employee or an employer task. So is it going directly to the new starter, or is this going to an existing employee? You can also specify whether this is a task for onboarding or offboarding. Now this system works exactly the same for onboarding as it does offboarding. Obviously it's just in reverse. So if we're setting an employee to say that they're now offboarding, we automatically trigger all the offboarding tasks for them. Now, this kind of is surfaced in a couple of different ways for users, but an easy way is just a short kind of list. So this would be like an employee task list to say, hey, go through, have you provided us your passport picture? Have you provided us your P45? And they can mark the tasks off as complete as they go through. They will also get reminders that come through into their Microsoft Teams instead of emails as well, to prompt them to make sure that they're staying on track of the tasks that you need them to as part of the onboarding process. Now, the next solution comes in the kind of compliance area. Now, sometimes this is a kind of quality control or it's HR, but essentially we see people using SharePoint for managing things like SOPs, policies, and basically making sure that SharePoint is a single source of truth for all key information. You can get reminders, you can get content to be stayed fresh, you can have version control, you can have approval processes, all built directly into your SharePoint site. So let's just jump into taking a little look at that. So if I go into my applications and go into my control documents area, and you can see we've got a little bit of a SharePoint homepage, which is completely configurable to your requirements. But we often would want to look at our kind of policies based on ISO accreditation, so ISO 27001, ISO 9001. We might want to just look at expired documents which we need to quickly look at. Or I can just go directly into viewing all of the documents. Now, to give you a quick example of this, say we have plenty of videos on our YouTube channel which go into much more detail about this, but just to give you a quick flavor, you can see every policy that we have inside of our system is tagged with a department that it's relevant to, who's maintaining it. We've got an approval status, which is either draft, pending, or approved, and that informs the version control. So for example, every time we publish and we approve a new document, it will increase the major number. So this would, if I was to publish this document, it would go to version 7.0 as an example. And we can take as many draft versions as we're editing a document as we like. Every document has a review date, so on that review date, it would automatically go and contact the reviewer and say, hey, you need to come and update this document, it's now out of date. Once they submit it for approval, it will go to the approver. They get the option of either rejecting it and then going back to the reviewer, or they can approve it, which again would then increment the version to a whole number because it's been approved. And it would also set the approval date to the day that it was approved. And then it would calculate based on the review period, so how often this document needs to be reviewed, when the next review date is, and set that. So say, for example, today is the 4th of August. If, say, for example, if I was to then approve a document today and it had 12 months on top of it, it would then automatically add 12 months on top of that. So then it'd be setting it to the 4th of August, 2026, as an example. We then automatically send our tracker groups. So our tracker groups are groups of people that we want to basically confirm have read this specific document. So if I just go into my document tracker area here, you can see we would actually be able to see who's read individual documents, so yes or no. We don't have a lot of data in here, but just unfiltered by me. You can then see we've got everybody in here, so we can see who's read documents, who's not read documents. We could filter it by a couple of different things, so based on the document name, based on the user, based on whether they read it or not, or the date that they've accepted it. So let's say, for example, if I was looking to filter by someone specific, I'm looking for, let's say, Paul Smith, and we can look for Paul Smith, and yes, he's read both of our policies that we want him to read. So this gives you two things. One is that you can easily go in and see who's not read a policy document and give them a bit of a kick up the bum and say, hey, why have you not read this particular policy document? You can chase them up. Now, the system will automatically chase them, but obviously you can see a list of everyone that is still yet to read or mark that they read the document. The other thing is, let's say, for example, there was a data breach and we found out that Paul had leaked some of our data. We could pull him into a meeting and say, hey, Paul, actually, you confirmed at this date and time that you accepted our data breach policy. So obviously he's on the hook for that particular issue. Now, there's loads of ways that you could potentially use this system, but as I say, it's completely it's a ready-made system that you can deploy directly to your SharePoint. If you're interested in it, there's a link in the description below to get a fixed price to deploy that system for you. Then the third solution is around kind of legal and contract management. Again, you can use SharePoint to keep on top of when key contracts are coming up for renewal or certificates inside your organization that are going to expire. Things like that you want to stay on top of. SharePoint is a fantastic tool for that. So again, I'm just going to go into my applications area up here and jump into my contracts management. Again, we'll have a little bit of a home page on here so we can see all contracts, contract reports, upcoming contracts, or contract help if we needed to reach out to someone, or we can go into my active contracts and you can see all the contracts in here. Now, obviously, this is just a test area, so there's loads of red and expired in here. But again, we've got a very similar system. It's a bit more simplified than the kind of the policy management that we were looking at before, but we can easily upload our documents into here. We can see an effective date, we can see a cancellation reminder date, so that we can set this. Maybe it's going to be 6 months before the contract, 3 months before the contract expires, a month before the contract expires. We can completely customize this to your requirements. You can see the status, whether it's expired, whether it's active. So again, we could filter, so we could say, only show me active contracts, so then we can see all of our active contracts. Maybe you would want to tag in here the supplier name. So it might be that you wanted to filter by a specific supplier and say, actually, show me all of the contracts that we have currently with Xero. And then you can see the active contracts you have, and you can see the contract owner as well. So this is really useful. Say, for example, if you wanted to filter by yourself or a specific employee, you can go in here and filter to only show contracts where you are the contract owner. Again, very simplified version, very similar kind of policy management, but a much more simplified version in there as well. We could also expand on that. So if you wanted it to say automatically email somebody, maybe the external contract provider, say, hey, the contract's coming up for renew, let's book in a meeting to discuss it, blah, blah, blah. We could automate all sorts of different steps like that as well. And then finally, I'm putting this as kind of all departments, but it's kind of business applications. Now, SharePoint, if you have SharePoint, you have and you have a license for SharePoint, you more than likely have a license for Canvas Power Apps as well. So Canvas Power Apps can be used to replace legacy or costly apps and use SharePoint as a place to store its data. So in SharePoint lists, you can have lists of data for things like expense request forms, leave request forms, things like that. So I'm just going to show you a couple of examples. So under our app section, we've got a couple of things which might use SharePoint for storing its data. Things like time tracking, desk booking, room booking, expenses, audit apps, things like that could all be using Canvas apps, but actually it's in the data is stored inside of SharePoint. We've got a leave request. So say, for example, if we wanted to book holiday, maybe in here we could see the calendar view, training videos, or even just jump directly into a Canvas app. Now, we can either embed the Canvas app directly into SharePoint if we wanted to, or we can have a tiled button which launches the full Power Apps application inside of a separate tab. So this is what we've done in this case. We've launched our leave request booking system, which is a Power App, but it's using SharePoint to store its data. We can see how much entitlement I have left to take. I can create a brand new request. So whether it's holiday request, sick leave, whatever it may be. I can put in some details here. So maybe I'm going shopping or something like that. And then I can click on confirm. I can see the full details of this and click on submit. Now this will then go to my line manager for approval. Once it's then approved, it will then be taken off my leave balance of holiday entitlement that I have. I can also see requests, so I can see all the previous requests that I've previously put through, or if I wanted to cancel any, I can do that from here as well. I can request time off in lieu, so you can have additional, you have your holiday balance, but you could also have a time off in lieu balance as well. And a manager's area, I can see who reports to me, and I can actually jump in and see their entitlement and what holidays they've taken. And we also have our company holidays in here, which at the moment we don't have anything listed, but these would be like bank holidays, Christmas, things like that, which basically the holiday booking system would take into consideration. Now, I just wanted to show you this as a real world example. As I say, there's so many different types of apps and solutions that you could build using Power Apps and SharePoint combined to replace costly third-party applications, clunky systems. And I say we build them as a one-off fee, and if you have a SharePoint license, you already have the ability to access Power Apps, so there's no additional license costs either involved. If you need any of these solutions, as I say, everything I've shown you today is already pre-built. We deploy them for our customers for a fixed one-off price fee. There's no additional licenses. This would cover the full configuration to your requirements, deployment, training, and ongoing support as well. There's a link in the description below to contact us to have a free demo of any of these systems as well. So thank you for joining. As I say, if you want to book your free 1-hour consultation with one of our experts, there's a link in the description below, and we'll be more than happy to answer any further questions you might have, or if you want to go into a more deep dive of any examples that you might be interested in actually deploying for your organization, again, use the link in the description below, and we would look forward to hearing from you today.